I am a CPA, 30 years inside the financial operations of law firms and professional services companies. I have read more balance sheets than most people will ever see in a lifetime. I have helped organizations navigate financial crises, restructurings, cash flow emergencies. Numbers are my native language, and for most of those 30 years, my own finances were a source of chaos, shame, and patterns I could not explain or stop. A financial expert with a money problem. I want to stay with that for a second because I think it tells you something important, not about me, about you, about why you are here right now watching a video about money when you already know what you're supposed to do. The problem was never the information. You have the information. The problem is something older than any advice you have ever received. And that is what we are going to get into today. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why your relationship with money behaves the way it does and what it is actually going to take to change it. Let's go. So, how does that happen? How does someone who lives inside financial complexity professionally completely fall apart personally? Here is what I eventually understood. At work, money belongs to an organization. It carries no emotional charge, no survival signal, no echo of what I watched and absorbed as a child about what money meant and how it behaved. I could be genuinely excellent with a client's finances precisely because they weren't mine. The moment money became personal, tied to survival, to love, to whether I was safe, something shifted entirely. The professional competence didn't disappear, it got flooded. Underneath every adult financial decision lived the child who had learned something very specific about money, something that was running the show without my permission. I avoided looking at my personal accounts. I made decisions I knew were financially irrational and made them anyway. I felt a kind of low grade shame about money that had nothing to do with how much of it I had. That gap between what I knew professionally and how I behaved personally sent me searching, not for another strategy, for an explanation. What I found changed everything I thought I understood about money. And here is where it gets interesting because what I found explains not just my situation, it explains yours. Here's the thing: most financial content will never tell you. Your money problem is not a money problem, it is a relationship problem, and it started before you were old enough to earn a dollar. Here's the insight that changes everything. Your relationship with money behaves exactly like your relationships with people. Same patterns, same wounds, same defenses. Here's why that's true. Psychologists have spent decades documenting how the attachments we form in childhood become deeply encoded in the subconscious mind, shaping every relationship we have as adults. We call this attachment theory, and it applies to money just as powerfully as it applies to people. Your earliest experiences with money, not the lessons you were taught, but the ones you absorbed, wrote themselves into your subconscious. An emotional logic about what money means, what you have to do to survive around it. And that subconscious programming is running your financial life right now, quietly, automatically. Underneath every decision you think you're making rationally. This is why the advice doesn't work. Conscious behavior is no match for subconscious survival, and survival always wins. This is not a character flaw. It is not a willpower problem. It is how the human nervous system works. And here's where it gets specific because there are not an infinite number of ways this wound expresses. There are four, and one of them is going to describe you so precisely it is going to feel uncomfortable, not because the framework is harsh, but because it is accurate. And accuracy, when it lands on something you have been living inside for decades without a name for it, has a way of stopping you
Over the course
cold.
of my
Let's look at
research,
all four. And my own personal work, I identified four distinct money attachment styles, four patterns that show up again and again across income levels, across professions, across generations. You'll recognize one of them immediately. You may have been living inside it for decades without having a name for it. The first pattern I call the vigilant. This is the person who earns and accumulates and still feels broke. Not because they don't have money, but because no amount ever feels like enough. The anxiety doesn't decrease as the account balance grows. If anything, it intensifies. John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest man in American history, kept meticulous handwritten records of every cent he spent his entire life, even at the height of his fortune. The vigilance never stopped because the vigilance was never really about the money. The second pattern is the distancer. This is the pile of unopened mail, the accounts you haven't looked at in months, the financial decisions you keep postponing. The distancer doesn't avoid money because they don't care. They avoid it because somewhere along the way, looking at money became associated with pain. Howard Hughes, one of the wealthiest men of the 20th century, spent the last years of his life in complete isolation. The avoidance that started with money eventually extended to everything. The third pattern is the cyclone. This is the person who keeps arriving at zero, not because they don't earn enough. Often they earn a great deal, but money flows in and flows out, and the pattern repeats. Tesla was a genius who died penniless more than once. The pattern was never about the money, it was about something much older than any paycheck. And the fourth pattern is the grounded. This is what a healed money relationship actually looks like. Not perfect, not without challenge, but rooted, able to earn, save, spend, and give without the emotional charge that governs the other three. Benjamin Franklin built wealth steadily across a lifetime without either the hoarding of the vigilant or the chaos of the cyclone. The grounded pattern is not a personality type you're born with. It's a state you can move toward. That's what this channel is about. But here's the question that matters most, and the one almost nobody asks. Where did your pattern come from? Because it didn't arrive with you, it was written into you. And the place it was written is somewhere you visit every single day in your memory, whether you realize it or not. So, where does your pattern come from? Your childhood home was your first financial classroom, not the lessons you were explicitly taught, though those matter, the ones you absorbed, the ones that were never spoken out loud. What happened in your house when money was tight? What did the adults around you do? Did they fight, go silent, pretend everything was fine? Did money appear and disappear unpredictably? Was it used as a tool of control, given as a reward, withheld as a punishment? What did you decide at age 6 or 8 or 12 that money meant? Maybe you decided that money means safety and that you can never have enough of it to feel safe. Maybe you decided that money means conflict and that the safest thing is to stay as far away from it as possible. Maybe you decided that money is unstable by nature, that it comes and goes and there's nothing you can do about that. Whatever you decided, you made that decision as a child trying to survive in a world that felt uncertain. That decision was rational, it was adaptive, it kept you safe in the way a child can be kept safe. The problem is that the decision didn't expire when you grew up. It went underground and it's been running your financial life ever since. Here's the part that took me the longest to accept, and the part that changes everything once you do. That decision can be revisited, the pattern can be interrupted, and the financial life that actually matches who you know yourself to be is not out of reach. Not with another spreadsheet, not with another budget app, with the kind of understanding that gets underneath the behavior to the wound that's driving it. Over the coming weeks, we're going to go deep into each of the four money attachment styles. We're going to trace them back to their origins. We're going to look at what healing actually looks like, practically, psychologically, and spiritually. If you have ever felt like your financial life doesn't match who you know yourself to be, this channel was built for you. And if you want to start right now, there's a link in the description to take the money attachment style quiz. It takes about 5 minutes and it will tell you exactly which pattern is running your financial life and what to do about it. There's also a link to the book, What Money Knows About You, which goes much deeper into everything we touched on today. I'll see you in the next video.